Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Moxtober daily recap. For those of you who don't know, Moxtober is an annual event where each day of the month of October there's a different one word prompt, and based on that prompt, people make different creative endeavors related to the game of Magic the Gathering. Most people make custom magic cards, which is what we're going to be reviewing today, but people also make deck lists, articles, art, essentially anything creative related to the game. Joining me today are Mark Confidant, ancestral of MPG.design, and Juliet, who's a new appearance this year, though for those of you who watched last year may remember her from a guest appearance then. She is a member of the Beacon of Creation community and is making a Jumpstart remix this year of Shadowmoor and I forget the other one, Eventide. Yeah,
Actually, just Eventide, but
just Eventide. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
small
we
sets only. That's the wrap.
yeah, we've featured some of her cards before, um, and today we decided to have her on the show. Um, and as always, all of the cards that we talk about today, their designers will be linked in the description. You can also find the MSC files and the mtg.design page for each day in the description, and also information on how you can potentially get your cards featured on these daily recaps. Um, but yeah, other than that, I think I will start us off by getting from the mtg.design file, Giles Master of Puzzles is going to be my first card for the day. So I was looking at this at first and I'm like, wait, what is going on here? Because I read the first line and I'm like, that just seems kind of dumb. Like, not every deck is going to have the ability to get like clues, so this can just be a moat on a creature, which while if you have interaction you can definitely get around it, is not the best. And then I saw the second ability, I'm like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Because it allows you to it's essentially just a ghostly prison on a body then. Um, but then you can also proactively use it to draw cards, or since the thing with any of these types of cards is like since it's legendary, I'm assuming as a commander you can build your deck around having just high artifact output. So have artifact sack outlets of your own, stuff that cares about the number of artifacts you control, etc., etc. So I love the play slash build around aspect of this. And also, I love the absolutely sinister look of the person in the art, just going, yes, yes. Make some clues. Keep me around. Definitely don't worry about me on your end step tapping out and making 4 or 5 clues each turn.
This definitely seems like an all-star commander card, right? Like this is what I want Wafa Hazid to be.
I really enjoy the idea of packing the deck that you build with this with all sorts of Kataki effects, making your opponents have to shell out even more in order to keep the clues that they're going to use to hit you in the face.
Yeah, Giles, I think it's interesting. It reminds me of there was a black red commander we had, uh Xantia, I think, which another one of these situations where each player can, I think on that one it's just literally draw a card, lose a life, or something like that. The it is kind of interesting, especially in a multiplayer game, if you've got an opponent who has a heavy artifact theme, if they've got something that's based on tokens. So I can totally see a lot of politics kind of going around here. It's also really just a great way to sync your mana, especially if in a lot of commander games you've got players playing 3 or more colors, and if you don't have the right colors in the board, the right lands, this is just one way to like get a token and keep fishing for extra lands. So yeah, I think if anything, the it's sort of a roundabout way, right? That ghostly prison effect is it's sort of roundabout, paying 2 mana to, I guess you basically have to pay 4 mana. But the fact that I think 2 mana draw a card essentially, well, I guess it's delayed. Even 4 mana draw a card is still really good.
One other thing that I kind of like about this in the context of Commander is usually propaganda effects kind of lock the go wide opponent out of hitting you almost entirely. Because this allows you to pay in installments, your opponent who's playing a bunch of small stuff can just gradually pile up enough clues to be able to hit you in the face with one big alpha strike, even if you have reasonable blockers to stop a few of them.
Or just dig through their deck for a piece of removal for Giles themselves.
See,
So,
but that's too practical.
and yeah, and obviously commander staples like lightning boots or what, lightning greaves and all of that, definitely make point and click removal a little bit less likely to be an out. So yeah, I can definitely see just slowly building up and then just being like, oh, I'll drop my Cathar's Crusade and then I'll drop True Conviction or whichever's the one that gives double strike and whatever, and so. You just build up your go wide enchantments. So, but yeah, okay, Juliet, since you're our guest, you can go next.
Sure. I'm going to go one left of that in the mtg.design. Looking at Inseparable Bond by GreyLotus.
Oh yeah, and before we move on,
Mhm.
you mentioning GreyLotus reminded me. This card is designed by Xisuthrus, so thanks Xisuthrus for Giles. But yeah, moving on to what was the name of the card again?
Inseparable Bond?
Inseparable. Yeah, exactly. Inseparable Bond.
The name's Bond. Inseparable Bond.
I it's got some fun ideas to it. Uh, like there's a possibility that this ends up kind of being Soul Bond uh, but also like there's that cool upside there. Um, this kind of floating indestructible around. I think the story of this card is interesting, and the mechanics of the card are interesting, even if I can't guarantee that the play of the card is like perfect. And the flavor text just with my life. I think I like how much this card can tell a story without needing to spend a bunch of text on the story. That the kind of play and interlock of the different parts makes a story together.
Yeah, I think I saw these cards when I was looking through. There's a few more with the mechanic that GreyLotus also designed. My main thing is I just I think that the involve requiring you to also maintain a good board presence makes it a little bit less attractive, or maybe that's just for me. But like when I'm evaluating this and I see it as a mechanic, I feel like it's either win more or it asks a lot of you to get it going, and I kind of wish there's a little bit more upfront value to it. But I love the flavor and I love the concept. I just think it probably needs like a little bit of tweaking and playtesting to get it to uh, a more like enticing spot, maybe.
Totally agree.
It reminds me a little bit of support along that front, where the fact that support required a bunch of different creatures in order for you to get it online meant that if you went like turn 2 2 drop, turn 3 3 drop, turn 4 support creature, you were kind of spiraling out of control. But otherwise, if you supported using only one out of two of the counters or something for a support card, then you felt like you had messed up and probably in some context sort of had.
Yeah, I'm a little confused here. So, because you'll involve up to 3 creatures, and at that time, because the reminder text says you sacrifice Inseparable Bond, but are they saying that if I let's see here, if I involve, I choose the creatures, but I don't lose the plot, right? I
You
think.
sacrifice the plot if at any point you only have one creature left involved in the plot, which in this plot's case
Okay. Okay.
isn't even a mechanic that like needs to be there for this card to work because the last creature, if you sacrifice it to give itself indestructible, doesn't doesn't do anything.
Right.
But presumably it implies there are other things.
Gotcha. Okay, I was thinking, well, I choose all three, but now I have to sack it right away. But no. You're choosing the three that are tagged or targeted or whatever. And then so yeah, it reminds me sort of like the bodyguard effects that we've had. We had that 1/1 bodyguard that, and then we had the dog. I'm drawing a blank on the names. We had that dog you could
It was, I
sacrifice.
think, Dauntless Bodyguard and Selfless Savior, if I'm remembering.
There you
right.
go.
Yeah, and I think there was even like a resolute something or other.
We had a rhino back in the day.
Yeah, but so this is sort of along that vein, and I mean, obviously, it's very on pie with color with white. I like the Three Musketeers kind of theme here, and I'm sure it was probably intentional getting three characters here, two Musketeers and a damsel or whomever in the frame. So it seems like a lot of fun. I think it might be a little confusing trying to keep track of which creatures have been involved, but I think that it's not too different from like selfless savior and those kinds of effects.
I think one thing is that like because they're 1-drops, you can like curve out a lot easier and then cash them in later when they're not as worth to help your big top end survive. Here it's kind of the opposite, where you need to curve into it. Like you have to go at least 1-drop, 2-drop this for it to be good. I guess it also comes to another issue I have with this, where it's like, I'm assuming the involve up to 3 creatures you control means on ETB, but that also means that like, I feel like you're restricted by having to curve into it and not being able to do stuff, like not being able to involve creatures after the fact. I can't remember what there's some mechanic that this reminds me of, where I had a similar feeling of like, man, I wish I could like both curve up into this and out of it, and that just that the play experience gives me a little bit of a heebie-jeebie. But yeah. Okay, so next up, Mark, what's your first card of the day?
My first card is in Magic Set Editor, and it is You Fools! It's 1 blue for an instant. Counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, add it to your plot instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. And I believe this is designed by Dr. Chillbrain. It's designed by Cajun.
The card itself is designed by the card itself is designed by Cajun. The plot mechanic is made by Dr. Chillbrain.
Okay, understood. Yeah. I really enjoy the plot mechanic, and I like seeing any mechanic that successfully manages like your standard 1 blue counter spell with sets mechanic. And here I really enjoy kind of the audacity of plot as a thing. I don't know if did I read off the plot, the reminder text for plot?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, so it's exile it face down. You may pay 7 once a turn as a sorcery to cast any number of cards in your plot without paying their mana cost. So anytime that like rules text says pay 7, you would think that it would be kind of not likely to come up, but because this is something where you can spiral into it gradually over time, you end up with kind of this like ticking time bomb of a thing going on with the plot. You can imagine seeing your opponent get to 6 mana after they've been playing the plot deck for a good chunk of time, so they have like 3 or 4 cards exiled, and knowing that when they get to that 7th mana, the odds are good that a crazy big effect is coming down functionally. Like they're essentially going to be able to quadruple or quintuple spell in a turn. And that very much has that like evil genius sort of the plan's really coming together vibe to it, at least in my mind. So you stop your opponent and with this counter spell, and then you're like, all according to plan, as you exile whatever it is that they were casting.
There is, in fact, a card for plot is a mechanic in a spy thriller themed set called Viridian's Last Mission, which is designed by Dr. Chilbrain, hence the credit there. And there's actually a card called All According to Plan in that set, which is, I think it's 1 blue sorcery, you add the top 2 cards of your library to your plot, make a gold token. So it ramps you, puts stuff in your plot, sets it up. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm going to show... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's a very good use of namespace right there.
Oh, yeah. And again, I'm going to shill the hell out of Viridian's Last Mission. It is a fantastic custom set. And if you like cheeky names and flavor references, it's great. It's also, I'm also going to shill, it's in the custom format Revolution, which is a standard-esque rotating format made up of custom magic sets. And you can play with Plot, and Plot is actually a pretty awesome ramp/combo deck, depending on how you decide to pilot it. So yeah.
Perhaps it's cheesy here that, or fitting rather, that we have "You Fools" as the card that followed Inseparable Bond. This I see the art on this and I think this is a James Bond villain, and I really love the flavor here because I think a lot of the evil villains will sort of tug the chains where they'll manipulate the friends of the protagonist or the protagonist's love interest or whatever it might be, right? All of a sudden they control that thing, or they've figured out how to turn something against them, and I think this captures that really nicely.
Seems sweet. I have almost like no notes for this. It's just like, yeah, this is this has me hooked to then go look at Viridian's Last Mission. Seems pretty neat. Maybe this whole Revolution thing has something going for it too. I ought to give that a look as well.
I can neither confirm nor deny that I have this the Revolution search engine up in a tab looking at all of the plot cards.
Yeah, and I'll be linking those in the description if you want to check them out yourself. But for now, let's move on to Ancestral's first card.
Okay, so I have to bring this one up because I was excited to see it, and I really wanted to be the one that brought it up here among the four of us. So this is a card, but it is not a card, and I will explain. But it's in the MSC set file. It's called Forswear the Flesh, and it is a scheme. So if you've ever played Archenemy is where one person is battling against 2, 3, 4 other people, and I think in the past Archenemy's just been flavored as Nicol Bolas basically versus the different planeswalkers. And in order to make things a little bit more either fair or unfair, depending on how you see it, the Archenemy has a scheme deck, and so basically, and it's been a while here, so maybe you can one of you can remind me the rules here. But basically, you flip over a scheme and you're able to set it in motion. And so this one, basically, when you set it in motion, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and then you create an XX Phyrexian Horror, where X is the total power of creatures sacrificed this way. So, so in most cases, I guess it's not going to be super large.
It
I was
depends on
initially
what they have
thinking
available to sack. Because if they have 1/1 tokens, easy. If they have like bears, or like maybe you killed their 2/2 some other way, so they just have their 4 mana 4/5 or something.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I was thinking of like Phyrexian Rebirth, those kinds of cards, but yeah, this is great. So all of a sudden, and this art, this flesh is coming apart, and you get this big monstrosity, and so I'm just really happy to see a scheme in the designs here.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, flavor-wise, lots of not all of, I believe, but lots of the Archenemy themed cards were themed around Nicol Bolas, and this one has Nicol Bolas struggling with the Phyrexian oil. It's like the new generation of Archenemy, which also makes sense given that that's kind of how the Magic plot has gone in the past few years, with Nicole Bolas defeated in War, and the Phyrexians now being hyped up as the next big villain. But yeah, I can't help with how schemes work because I've never played Archenemy and I've never watched any Archenemy, so I have no idea how this works, but just the entire concept intrigues me. So shout out to MBTree for designing this.
My whole experience with Arch Enemy is through Arch Frenemies, which is just like reduplicated complexity across like the whole multiplayer situation. I don't know that a card has ever made me like feel for Nicol Bolas before. If that makes sense. Like it's Nicol Bolas. But now it's like, oh no. I don't want Nicol Bolas to be caught up by the Phyrexian oil.
I feel like a flustered parent being like who's looking at a kid who came through the door and they're all muddy. And it's like, Nicole, what did you do this time? Oh no, your new skin, it's completely ruined. But yeah, Mark, do you have any comments on the card?
I was trying to look in the context of other schemes how this is, because I think like what schemes are supposed to do in Arch Enemy is provide some combination of like interesting variants and that they're like super novel, huge effects that you wouldn't normally get to see happen at the stages in the game where they happen. But then also to provide something that's kind of a catch-up mechanic for the player who's functionally kind of up against a three-headed giant, because I think the standard arch enemy size is 3v1. And I think that this is like pretty on rate for schemes insofar as there is a quote-unquote rate. But I like the effect and I like how it ties to an existing Phyrexian card. I will also admit that I haven't the foggiest what is supposed to be the appropriate rate for schemes.
I think it is supposed to be a bit varied. That some of them aren't going to be as good as others, and some of them are going to be a little bit better at different times. Imagine just like a Magic deck, right? Some cards are going to be better situationally than others, but it's I think just like any kind of board game that involves a deck of cards, and you roll on chance and you flip it over. It makes the experience more interesting.
Yeah, especially for a mostly casual format like Arch Enemy, where variance leads to replayability and excitement, which we love. That is kind of, yeah. I don't know where I was going with that afterwards. I could have just stopped there. But next up, to move on to my next card, speaking of schemes, in the MSC file, let's look at Telepath Scheme, which isn't an actual scheme card. Sorry, y'all. But what this does is it's 1 blue enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you look at target opponent's hand and secretly choose a card name. And then you can reveal the name you chose, sacrifice Telepath Scheme to counter a spell with the chosen name. And I think that this is just like fantastic because there's like I feel like lots of other pre-counter spells like Lunar Force deliberately are kind of like there's not much interesting to them because you just throw a spell that you care about less into it, or you just play normally and you're like, well, okay, it's basically a removal spell. Whereas here there's a lot of like mind games you can do about like, oh, if you have like even 3 spells all of a sudden of like around equal cost, it's like, man, okay, which one do they name? And I love the flavor. I think that this just feels like a really fun card to me. I don't know that I have much more to say. So thanks to BoofTroupe for submitting this card.
It seems like a more like certainly more playable and limited and more just like generally playable Declaration of Naught, which is an old blue enchantment that it comes into play, you just name a card, you don't look at anything, and then you pay a blue at any time to counter a spell with that name. And that works as kind of a long-term hate card against, combo decks effectively, or I guess a control deck with only a certain like hinge condition. But this seems much more kind of neutrally playable in a lot of situations, while also being less value as a result. Kind of higher floor, lower ceiling. I like this. I like the mind game here. I think this is a really fun, weird mind game to involve.
I'm a little spooked about adding peak onto a counterspell effect because, like, at that point, the person who's like basically suspending a counterspell for themselves has perfect information over how their control spells line up against their opponent's threats. So you can either name the best card or you can name the card that you think that they're most likely to play in the following turn if you don't have an answer quick at hand. Uh, and just the idea that having perfect information can give you an advantage over the flow of the game in a way that can be, I don't know, less dynamic and maybe a little more frustrating for your opponent is, I don't know, it's kind of tricky for me that it's something I'd rather avoid personally. Maybe there's a way to do like a blackmail style thing for this where um like they reveal their hand to you unless they reveal some number of non-land cards. And then you secretly choose a card name. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I almost feel like I'd prefer to just move it up to 2 blue in that case and just keep the simplicity and
Hmm.
like keep the simplicity, reduce the power level a bit. At least, yeah.
I think actually it's not that strong. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the politics in multiplayer could work really nicely. Like, hey, what does that person have or whatever, or we really need to get rid of this, this card that we bounced, or I know that they have whatever in their hand, and you can kind of play at the table. And but I think actually it's much weaker than just like a Thoughtseize kind of card. Where a black reveal a hand, choose a card, and discard it. So I actually think it could be a little bit more aggressive.
If I were going to put a condition on this, I think it'd be something around like tapping a creature you control and looking at that number of cards from any number of players' hands or something like that. I think that'd be a
Hmm.
cool thing to put some bounding, put some creature into it, but also then potentially raise kind of a power level elsewhere.
What about doing this as a negate? So, like, you would bring this in as a sideboard card in these control mirrors where having that extra bit of information wouldn't be as backbreaking because oftentimes the game would go long enough that they would probably draw another half dozen cards in the fullness of time anyway.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, I think all of these are like fine changes, but I think they kind of reduce the element of just straightforwardness that appealed to me from the original design. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Juliet, what's your next card?
So this one's on mtg.design. Card name is Villein. Uh, a very fun one. It's a single green, undying 1/1. When Villein dies, it explores, which is just such a great line of text. When Villein dies, it explores, which can work because of undying. Uh, uh, it's a skeleton peasant, of course, because a Villein is a farm worker, more or less. I think it's a really fun thing that we're able to get. I don't know, not to be a nerd, but like that's fun vocab. It comes from the same root as villa, literally Latin for like country home. Um, I just hope this card isn't too like war weary or wayward.
There's a lot of punniness to this card in that Villein sounds like villain, and then uh, the Lord in the flavor text is involved in a plot, and also as a peasant, the Villein was likely buried in a plot.
Yeah, MonoWhiteBorder. So today is day 6, and the number of words in the rules text, there are 6 words.
Oh.
So if you see MonoWhiteBorder's submission for tomorrow, for example, there should be 7 words in it. I really like, and I think they were trying to do as many skeletons as possible. So basically skeletons in all the colors. But I really like Skeleton Peasant. I don't think we'll ever see a Skeleton Peasant card in Magic except for this card here.
The number of constraints that MonoWhiteBorder is putting themselves under is like impressive to still be producing cards that are like not just like reasonable cards, but have as crunchy of like rules text as they do.
This goes to show we all gotta put more constraints on our design to really grind out the great stuff.
What's that saying? Limitation breeds creativity, something like that. Yeah.
Restrictions breed creativity. I don't know who said it. I think it's just like lost to time, but certainly someone did at one point.
I know Mark Rosewater paraphrases it a lot.
Okay. So next up, Mark, what's your next card?
My next card is also from the mtg.design file. It's Jeann, the Poisonous Tongue. It's a legendary human noble, costs S per mana to cast, and is a 2/4. When Jeann enters the battlefield, target opponent becomes the monarch. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player is the monarch, scry 1. And as long as an opponent is the monarch, attacking creatures you don't control get +2/+0 whenever they attack the monarch. I just really enjoy this as a political commander because usually you'd be trying to grasp at the monarch, but the idea of having putting someone else up as the monarch and putting a target on their back has this very like politics centric group hug but not really sort of vibe to it, especially because there's a pretty strong incentive to steal the monarch in general, and you, I guess, when constructing a deck around this, would probably want to put as many things in your deck that could enable opponents to steal the monarch from one another as possible.
Yeah, I like monarch matters, but hey, everyone get to be the monarch each successive turn, and I'll get my payout. That's a really fun approach mechanically. There's a few cards for this design prompt that did things in the target opponent becomes the monarch space. I think I like this execution out of that group of cards.
I think Jeann needs to be a rebel. Like, I just kind of figure it's sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Jeann is trying to I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Take down authority, right? So it's sort of like an anti-authority card, rebelling against those in charge, and she's incentivizing people to question and attack authority, and I think that works really great with the monarch, and I want to attack the monarch too. Like if defeating the monarch wasn't already just an incentive for the extra card, like now I can even get in the extra damage. So I do like that this is sort of turning the tables of in the last 2 conspiracy sets. It was always, it was good to be the monarch. You want to be the monarch. Now it's kind of like, well, actually, hang on a second. So I think this is an interesting twist.
I get the rebel point of view. I do think noble works here from a like Machiavellian sort of thing. Like I'm gonna make sure that my opponent gets power and position before they have all their ducks in a row, so that then they're the target that then other people will knock down, and like setting up everyone for all of these failures, and then until you finally ascend to the role and your plot all comes together.
I think rebels kind of imply like outsideriness, where I see this commander as like enough of an insider to have a finger on each of the scales, but not enough to be at the center more than occasionally. Because you can become the monarch as this. One of the things that I did kind of think would be cool would be if you get rid of you don't control from the last line, then you have the opportunity to steal back the monarch if you want to. Um, well, more of an opportunity. You always do in general. But I like the idea of this person who has enough of a hand on the wheels of power to really screw you over by giving you control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, y'all said whatever I was gonna say about this card, anyways. Card good. So thanks to PauloToge for making this card. And ancestral. What's your next design? Or wait, yeah.
All right. Well, we're talking about monarchs, so let's talk about Dastardly Conspiracy, which is in the MSC file, and this is an aura for 1 and a black. When enchanted creature dies, you become the monarch. Very simple, very clean. I like that it's sort of taking the idea you want to defeat the monarch, and so in this case, it's sort of taking that but putting it on a creature. So now I want to kill the creature to become the monarch. So it's sort of doing the same thing. It's turning the monarch into a creature almost. I mean, the creature isn't actually the monarch here, but politically, again, multiplayer game, you put this on a creature that you don't want. It's sort of like putting a bounty on a creature and trying to get you can try to get your opponents or allies to destroy that creature for you.
Yeah, speaking of turning the monarch into a creature, I almost wonder what like a player version of this would be, where it's like when enchanted player dies, it's aura curse. When enchanted player dies, you get an emblem with at the beginning of your end step you draw, or basically something where it's like, and then like the aura gets passed around, but the emblem is persistent, so it's kind of a race to hit the person who has the emblem, but also at the same time kill the person who's been cursed. So
should it say when enchanted player loses the game? Or is this a silver bordered card?
Well, we have a card like we have a card like this, Curse of Vengeance, where when a player dies, loses the game, you gain life and draw cards. So this is a very like small condensed version of Curse of Vengeance.
yeah, I'm not sure what would be silver border about it.
Oh, if it was when enchanted player dies,
they actually die. They pass away.
like
Oh, okay. Just jump at them across the table. Okay,
and if you exile
never.
a player, they literally have to go away. Like they can't return back home.
The
Just
one time in
imagining-
Magic when being exiled is a kinder fate than dying.
Right.
I'm just imagining like softly laying a revolver on the table and being like, I need that ability to trigger.
I will also say Dark Banishing, another example of death being more merciful than no that's the other way around. My bad. Sorry. Dark Banishing has flavor text from Romeo and Juliet. The like banishment, no, say death. Death would be kinder than banishment.
Okay. So in that case, I'll move on to my next card, which I have to look up in my file real quick. Oh, there's so many good ones. Hold on. I think the most innovative one from today, though, out of all of the ones that I have on my list, is a plot that spans centuries. Let me see if I can get the right card here. Yeah, okay. So the base form of this is pretty simple. It's 1 green and a blue. You search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it onto the battlefield. We're all pretty simple so far. And then you have the next line, open the Arcana plot booster. In reminder text, choose one of the cards in it and put it into your hand. It's added to your draft pool. When I saw this, I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then Wobbles on the Beacon of Creation Discord posted an article talking about plot boosters, which I still need to read. But they accompanied it with a test booster card, or well, I forget what it's called, not test booster. You guys know what I mean. The playtest cards that had the open a plot booster thing, and I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, the idea of just like getting to add cards to your draft mid games, that as you complete more rounds, your deck becomes more powerful, and while still having impact mid game is kind of crazy. And I love the sheer insanity of it, and how it opens up new game slash play experiences. Um, and I can't show all of them, but then here the Arcana plot booster essentially. I think the idea of it, if I remember what, and the designer of this is Gateway7, who is yesterday's guest, um, is that it's 5 card packs and 1 card of each color, and there's kind of a pool of like 25 to 50 cards that it's generated from. So it has Tempered by Humility, which is essentially a slightly more expensive O-ring, In Reach of the Moon, which is Search for Iskanta like, except without the flip. Hermit's Solitude, which is, I believe, a Rift. There's a similar card. I forget the name, but it's an Innistrad card which encourages you to have only 1 creature. Um, there's Heaven Piercing Blade, which is just Orcish Oriflame, and then Bloodbrim Cup, which you can exile 3 creature card or 3 cards from your graveyard and make a 1/1 black horror token at the beginning of your upkeep. So all like slightly above rate cards, or maybe not above rate, but they're definitely like they're powerful build arounds in their own right, or just good cards. So like, yeah, you never like feel bad about opening something, and you get something for whatever color you're in. I think it's interesting specifically on a plot that spans centuries, because if you're ramping and fixing yourself, you can kind of mid game be like, oh man, which card do I want? I almost want the clauses to be flipped. So you open the plot booster, and then you get to search for a basic land, so that you can kind of like fix yourself for maybe an off color plot booster card. But yeah.
One thing that I've been thinking about kind of abstractly lately is what it would look like to have a Risk Legacy style.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, a Risk Legacy style Magic draft object of some sort. Because I think, like, to my mind, what I imagine this showing up in is something along the lines of that. And then there are these interesting questions about, okay, are the plot that spans centuries, uh, are they the plot booster cards? Do they uh, can you open the booster more than once, or is it once the booster is opened, you couldn't pick another card to add to your draft pool? Is it that you add them to, like, let's say that you do multiple drafts with the same ongoing card pool? Do the plot that spans centuries plot booster tokens get put into the general draft pool afterwards? Like, what mechanically happens to them becomes this pretty interesting sort of series of knobs if this does end up being in like a legacy style of thing. And what happens in terms of like card inflow and card outflow to what is functionally like a cube becomes very interesting there to me.
I could totally see a magic. I don't know if a variant is the right word, but a magic product that maybe it doesn't have to be as large as a full set of boosters, but the whole idea is large enough where you could do a 6 or 8 player draft, and then there would be along the way there would be different goals you would have, like a legacy game, and you open the boosters in a certain order, and maybe the person who won the first game, they have to play with an advantage or a disadvantage, or something around that, and other people can get a card from the plot booster and sneak it in. And so there's a lot of really cool things you could do, and some design space here, and I'd be really tempted to play something like this. And I we did have an unset card where you got to open open a booster pack and choose a card from it. So I think this is just awesome.
I know legacy cubes were kind of an in vogue thing to try to design a few years ago, and booster tutor cubes have also been a thing. I think more recently, where it's like, here is a pack that you can open of other cards that aren't in the cube but are at the same power level, and here's booster tutor, a card that you can draft in this cube. And so things in this space, you know, I think it makes sense. I think it's a reasonable way of approaching magic, physical objects. I'm not sure about magical, online digital objects, but at the very least, physical ones.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, what's going to be your next card, Juliet? Also, I would like to say, looking at the time, it looks like this is probably going to be our last round. So make your picks according to that. So we're going to do probably it's going to be our last round, and then we're going to move into talking about individual, like what we designed ourselves for the day. So
Well, there's a lot of great cards designed today, but one I'd like to take just a second to talk about is it's on the medium.com/milling for 53 page. Um, it's Limbed Grazing Wanderer, 3 and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature troll scout. When this enters the battlefield, tutor for a library from uh, tutor for a land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle. When this leaves the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each different name among lands you control. It has partner. This is part of another Moxtober Jumpstart thing that Bradley Rose is, of course, doing, where each pack is a partner commander. Um, and you kind of get 2 packs together to do a fun little partner commander thing. And I love this like tutor for a land in a jumpstart setting where you have your lands and then potentially whatever lands show up in the other pack. I'm also really interested in like Treetop Village is in this pack. And like creature that can tutor for a treetop village is a nice power level to me. Like that's a really compelling, that can really win you the game in a lot of situations, but also the ceiling on it isn't breaking any format wide open.
yeah, and I think that uh, the ability to like control the synergies that you have to a really tight degree, even more so than a regular set or even a cube, in a jumpstart setting is really cool because like more so than I think any other format, you can really tailor player experience while still obviously giving them like such flexibility and agency by like having their choice of deck combinations or and like obviously like making sure that your themes are like synergistic in a way that like that choice feels meaningful. So yeah, that seems pretty cool.
My experience with Jumpstart
Oh,
has been to kind of flatten the difference, or tighten the cycles of lands so they're pretty much identical across the different packs, and like you kind of solved for some formula of lands. And so Bradley's approach of every pack has a command tower and a bunch of basics, but also some very different non-basics is like a really exciting and weird idea to me.
How do you guys feel about this in the context of like regular commander? If someone sleeved this up for a commander game, would it depend primarily on what the other partner was, or how would you feel about this there?
well, it's not as powerful as Golos.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. Like
depends
command.
on the land context. I mean, if you're at a table where just pulling off Dark Depths combo means no one's allowed to have fun anymore, eh.
Um,
Yeah,
I
commander is
do
such a
think that
volatile format.
it is a super volatile format. I think the fact that so the play pattern that was described to me that makes Golos really frustrating is that you can play Golos, you get a land. If your opponents remove it, then if you draw a land, you can just play Golos again. And if you draw gas, then you just draw gas. So it's whatever. Um, and if they don't remove Golos, then by the time that you've played Golos, you can probably spin Golos. So there's just this thing where, regardless whether your opponent interacts with it or not, you're kind of SOL. But I think that actually splitting Golos across two bodies, where one body is the Golos part, and even if your opponent has like a mana sink as their other part to the partner pair, you can just remove the mana sink, and then they aren't going to be getting additional lands off of the land part of this. So I think it's reasonably well balanced there. Obviously, like Commander is such a big format that I could easily eat my words on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think tutor play patterns in Commander can sometimes lead to repetitive games, but you can also do interesting toolbox stuff with them. And I think it ultimately comes down to like what Commander is very much determined by your play group. So, whoa, what do the people you play with find fun, and you tailor it to them. Um, but yeah, what's going to be your last card, Mark?
I'm gonna go with a card on the Magic set editor side of things. It's Awakening of Zur'zaax. 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Awakening of Zur'zaax enters the battlefield with 20 sleep counters on it. Whenever you cast a spell, remove a number of sleep counters from Awakening of Zur'zaax equal to the spell's mana value. If you can't, sacrifice it and create Zur'zaax, a legendary 8/8 blue Kraken avatar creature token, with hexproof and this creature can't be blocked. I like the idea here of a slow boiling, like uh, Merit Lage style. This monster is going to get out of hand very shortly. I'm not sure that I would do it as ticking down rather than ticking up personally, but I like the idea of caring about mana value here specifically because that makes it harder to achieve in wider formats rather than easier. It's more difficult to cast expensive spells in bigger formats. Oh, it's on mtg.design. Sorry, not Magic Set Editor. That's my bad.
Yeah, and I think that the difference between ticking up and ticking down is that like you slap a solemnity on this and then uh, you just cast another spell. Like obviously, there's always like dream scenarios, but you go like turn one dork, turn two Awakening of Zur'zaax, turn three Solemnity, cast like another dork or something, and then you get your legendary 8/8 Kraken. So I think that ticking up makes it a little more like, and maybe that's like maybe having that combo case is more interesting, but I also feel like there are other ways to combo with Solemnity. So I feel like you can just if you make this a fair card, quote unquote, and tick up.
I think this is fine. I think that, well, in Commander 88, it's not really that big of a deal, and even stuff with hexproof. This really calls to Kiora, who bests the wave. I'm probably butchering that name, but the Kiora saga, where you destroy a whole bunch of tap down a whole bunch of stuff, and then yeah, in the end you get an 8/8 hexproof. In limited, I think this would be a bomb. I think that anyone would love to have this. Uh, Although it takes a while to, 20 counters equal to spell's mana value. Okay, so I guess it's not too bad. It's definitely an interesting riff. It's a little bit different from the Merit Lage kind of effects that we've seen.
I think I would much rather see Awakening of Zur'zaax on the other side of the table than Thing in the Ice. I think this, despite the hexproof and can't be blocked and everything, I think this has reasonable counterplay to it. Like you can have other creatures that are doing things. Uh, yeah, it. Part of me is like, oh, is it more interesting if you put some parameter on spell, non-creature spell, make it more blue? At a certain point, there's kind of a question of how blue is this sort of setup. But as is, it's certainly. I mean, this could be printed
Yeah. I do like the whole dirtliness here. Like it's sort of I can just imagine, a fictional setting where, these particular, I mean, the flavor text is finally our Lord is awakened. Praised be his name. That you have these like devotees, that are spending all this time and energy trying to resurrect their Lord, and no one heeds them any attention. They're just like, oh, those crazy kobolds doing their kobold thing, and then all of a sudden, oh, Zur'zaax is around, and yeah, there's no way we're gonna be able to defeat Zur'zaax, and everyone's eating their words.
Yeah, it feels also the flavor feels very like very Stromkirk of Innistrad. Uh, like they're all about praying to deep sea creatures that may or may not, like again the Merit Lage comparison.
Yeah.
Um,
Creatures that might or might not be totally comfortable eating them.
Pretty
I
much,
also
yeah.
think, yeah, I also think this card fits pretty well into like, there's been that casting big spells matter micro theme in a couple of sets now, and it kind of slots pretty naturally into that when blue and another color are doing it.
Okay. Um, and with that, ancestral. What's going to be our last not designed by us card for the day?
Sure thing. So I'm gonna go with a fun card, but I don't think it's necessarily a what's the word I'm looking for? I shouldn't say it's a good card, but I don't think it's a particularly. I guess it's an interesting card. It seems fun, but I think actually in actual gameplay it might not it might not be a lot of fun to play against, and that's Benvolio the Great. So 1 white, blue, black, and we have a planeswalker that does a bunch of stuff with your library. Um, I don't think that the the planeswalker isn't really doing a whole lot. And maybe, it's fitting here we have this magician who's got these like, magic tricks and, moving things with his hand, and I just like that uh, you gain 3 life, you may shuffle a library. It just seems so annoying that it's too fun not to play it. Uh, and everything just it's all threes. It's the top. It's 3 life. Draw 3 cards. Put a creature third from the top. It's got 3 loyalty, and I just think all of that is really really fun.
Yeah, I think given all of that, I honestly think that this could just be 3 mana, like especially as a tricolor, and
Sure.
it doesn't do much if you're just plussing it up. Where it really shines is being able to first minus it so that you can either brainstorm or just straight murder something by just shuffling something away permanently. But yeah, I love this confluence of effects on a single card, where it's the idea is how can I make shuffling a library actually matter, and it makes both shuffling your own library matter and shuffling your opponent's library in kind of a neat package. I do feel like maybe this isn't the final iteration of the card I'd go with, notwithstanding changing the cost. I think that there are other like tweaks you could do to make the play of this a little bit better, in the sense of like give you more options, make it so that you're more enticed to like maybe use the plus first, or and not just like dirtle out the game with the 3 life. Maybe there's like a different payoff, but yeah, I like overall I like the concept of like how can we make shuffling libraries matter. So big kudos to Queen Emily for that.
I like the interconnectedness of the abilities because, like, if you're going for plot as a term for like a series of steps that you take to achieve a goal, having a grip tide that you then shuffle away to upgrade into a murder, or having a brainstorm that you shuffle to make it kind of sort of ancestral recall, um, is a way of doing like the progressing a plot sort of concept quite well.
Okay, and with that, let's move to talking about our own individual designs, starting with Juliet. So what did you design for this Moxtober day?
Uh, so talking about plots, I've got a sorcery for 1 in a red at common named Plot Twist with exchange control of 2 target permanents with the same mana value.
Juliet, how can Switcheroo be a 1 red card?
Well, so glad that you asked. So this is of course for part of my Eventide Jumpstart remix. Um, and the red monocolor pack for that involves a lot of like non-creature focus. So I was like, okay, I've got these ideas of needing some more weird sorceries that do things. There's also manifest in this format. Quite a lot of manifest actually. So we've got a lot of 2/2s around that also kind of are a card that is a spell you can cast a lot of the time because of the back half of manifest. And so the idea of trading a land for a manifest or trading a manifest you have for a land an opponent needs seems like really interesting stuff on top of, you could trade your 4-drop for their 4-drop. But because the mana value restriction is there, you're never really getting like a great swindle on value. It's only like corner cases and thinking of how to figure out a kind of way to make it work. This is, probably safer than cleansing wildfire, all told.
Yeah, it's certainly an effect that made me double take at first, but I'm really loving how lots of the cards in your jumpstart thing are effects that seem a little weird at first blush, but then make a lot of sense contextually, or can do a lot of work contextually. And so, um, and I think that's something that I wish more designers would explore, because I think it's very easy to get stuck into, well, I'll make a standard level set, or just like even just a set of some sort, but then experimenting with different playstyles out the gate can lead to, again, like what I liked about Jumpstart, where you can like really make the synergies super focused, so that cards that, I think if this was in a draft environment with the same themes, this could, it wouldn't be draft chaff, but it would not be, I think, a super high pick. While here in Jumpstart, because you have the ability to tailor it and guarantee a certain degree of specific cards, you can be like, yeah, okay, I'll be seeing something where I can ensure XYZ play pattern, or like I can ensure that I'll be seeing a manifest to trade for a land enough that this is like worth my while. So yeah, fan of it in that regard.
I think a lot of times I would just want to exchange. Like if depending on the environment here, I might want to like take some really amazing, non-basic land. Like here you go, you can have my plains, and I'll take your Maze of Ith or whatever it might be. Uh, this I like the ability of kind of trading up, but um, trying to think of a good analogy, but it's having, maybe it's like the same sized object but different prices. You know what I mean? Like I'll take your really delicious looking roast beef sandwich, and you can have my banana, or something like that. Um, so the whole plot twist here too. I like the name on that because it's, you're watching a movie, you're reading a book, and then all of a sudden it turns out that person isn't who they say they were, or this person defected to the other side. So I think it makes total sense.
One thing I find interesting is this is a pretty compelling way to give red land ramp, in the sense that you could manifest something and trade it away, or create a token and trade it away in order to net mana. So you're ramping at that point because you're getting their land and they're getting something
That's
that,
true, right? You could give them a token. Yeah.
I would hope that token production in general is pretty sparse, because the idea of like trading a treasure for a land seems pretty harsh. Where at least like a manifest is a 2/2.
Sorry about your land. Here's some gold.
Right.
There's currently 0 tokens in this entire Jumpstart format. I might not finish every pack still with 0 tokens, but currently any place where tokens would be manifest from somewhere is kind of in that.
It would
that
be
spot.
it would be a very easy fix too if you had to, mana value 1 or more, but I no,
But then you
I'm
lose the other meaning of plot, where it's like, haha, I've twisted, I've traded your land for my land. I've done a plot twist.
fair enough. Yeah.
I
Right, a
think-
plot. Exactly.
I think that the constraint that you've imposed on yourself here with this is essentially that any tokens that you do create, you want to have be either the same size or bigger than manifested cards. Because like right now, trading the manifested card for the land is essentially like it's kind of beast withinning. Yeah, so like as long as you don't get to the point where it's like anything backbreaking, like oh, here's a lone sad Eldrazi spawn in exchange for your like Gaia's Cradle level of like heartbreaking. I think you're gonna be okay.
Okay. Are there any other cards you designed for today, Juliet, or can we move on to Mark?
I've gone down to just 1 card a day. I started strong, but I think 1 card a day is more sustainable.
Makes sense. Okay, Mark, what did you design today?
My design is also in the Magic Set Editor files. It is Funerary Chief / Remembrance Stones. On its front face, it's a creature human druid 2/2 for 1 and a green with tap add green, and then it has Gravestone 3 and a green. For 3 and a green and sacrifice a land, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield transformed. And on its backside, it's a land with the subtype Cemetery, and you tap it to add green for each creature you control. So the thought process here for me was something along the lines of like, what would it look like to have like a cemetery plot as a card? And the idea was so creatures die and they leave behind like a land that is emblematic of how they related to the world around them. So in this case, like an actual literal like graveyard, kind of like a Stonehenge sort of graveyard. But in other contexts, it could be like a smith who leaves behind a legacy of like building weapons or something like that, or it could be essentially like sort of a form of flashback. I added a cost to this to have another like knob on it. I think that for a reasonable number of them, it would be pretty close to being 0, and you would just be upgrading one of your lands into some other land that had a utility land style effect, or was a man land, or fixed your colors, or something along the lines of that. I've been going for designing cards that imply the possibility of making a limited mechanic with them. And so I think there'd also be something along the lines of being able to track things that are tagged as cemeteries or otherwise do things along the lines of that.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I think that I think I mentioned this on an earlier episode, I love variants of flashback / just value from grave mechanics. And I think the knob of having to sacrifice a land here is a minor one, but it's one that you can also like build synergies around, or just it forces you to kind of you can't just use it as ramp, etc. There's play there, which is I think exciting / interesting. But yeah, overall I think the mechanic is straightforward and good, as is the card itself.
If you hadn't been on this episode, I would have brought this card to talk about in an earlier round. I think it's a compelling mechanic. I think the Gaia's Cradle like execution means like, oh, you can do some weird and interesting stuff with this. I like the flavor text on the back. The only thing that I kind of like struggle with on this card, it's so silly, is the second point of toughness on the front side. I don't know what it is, but for like a 2 mana like mana bear,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not used to like 2/2. I'm like, oh, but shouldn't it be a 1/2 or a 2/1 or a 1/3? And it's like it's so small, but I'm like, but it has this upside. Shouldn't it have a, you know?
Part of the thought process for me on the extra point of toughness, like, and trying to contribute to like the front side feeling like a real creature you can send into the red zone
Mhm.
was I kind of wanted it to be like the sort of mana dork where you like look your opponent dead in the eyes and say, I dare you to kill this.
Sure. That makes sense.
This reminds me of Itlamok, Growing Rights of Itlamok, where it transforms into the guy's cradle. And we also had Circle of Dreams Druid recently, which was also an elf druid that tapped for that. Basically, it was this card kind of together. Uh, I kind of like the idea that it's a creature that gets better. It's you start off with 1 green mana and you could potentially end with green mana for every creature. So I do like that kind of it gets better when it dies. And I don't know, maybe there's some kind of like poetry to a creature that kind of morphs or turns into the environment around him or her or around them. It's sort of becoming one with the land. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit deeper than what you had intended, Mark. But I do like the idea of I guess leaving a legacy in becoming something bigger than yourself.
The type land cemetery on the back just like instantly made me I want to see more cards from this set. This hook has pulled me in.
Okay. And then ancestral. What card did you design today?
Well, regrettably, I don't have a card. I really wanted to find the time here. Just some personal things came up this week. But if I were to design a card for plot, I think I would look to I guess one that comes to mind is just all the things that are going on in the conspiracy sets. And I am pained to say that I've never drafted conspiracy. Although no, that's not true. I did draft the second conspiracy set once, and it was a blast. But there's a card called Deadly Designs where you literally have plot counters, and so I would probably try to find some kind of riff on that using actual plot counters. And I just think designs that involve all the players on the table are really engaging, a lot of fun. I think that too often we're stuck with Magic cards that it goes on the board and it stays on the board and it doesn't really do a whole lot. And I think when you have cards and other people can engage with them, I think that makes for more lively gameplay.
For sure. And like I totally get the thing about being busy. I mean, uh, I've designed a few cards behind the scenes, but definitely gonna have to do some catch up week 2 if I want to get to my plan of hopefully having a set by the end of this month.
You and me both. I've got the I've got the urge to have a set finished, and I don't know, maybe I won't get there, but there's nothing wrong, and I think I mentioned this before for anyone who's listening or playing along at home, right? There's nothing wrong with going back later and revisiting designs or right working on days that have already passed. You should be having fun and doing as little or as much as you like.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the wrap up for this, which is thank you for all the people who did end up sending in designs and making all these cards. Without you, Moxtober would not be able to exist. Um, Thanks again to Juliet, Mark Confidant, and Ancestral for joining me, and thanks specifically again to Ancestral and Cajun for putting together technology to make this possible, and Mark, Bradley, Juliet, and the rest of the Beacon of Creation team for supporting Moxtober and essentially making it into the event that it is. Um, yeah, and as always, all the designer credit for the designs we talked about is in the description, as well as the collected files for all of the. I think today it was like a meager 150 down from the 200 that we usually get, but still, insane numbers from the mtg.design plus MSE set files. Um,
That's more than 10 jumpstart packs.
oh yeah. Um, yeah, just I fully expect to have 5 to 6 thousand cards by the end of this month, and it's going to be amazing. Um, but yeah, other than that, I don't think I have anything to say before we wrap it up. Does anyone else have some closing comments they want to make? And if not, okay, this is going to be Caillou signing off.